So I'm one of those people who cannot watch a show, read a book, or contemplate a piece of art without overthinking its meaning. And in the case of Squid Game, well, I went a bit further than that. Also, another thing I like to do is trying to compare what I understood with what the author tried to convey through art. And so here's what Huang had to say about Squid Game. This game could be the most symbolic children's game that shows various aspects of the very competitive society that we live in today. After watching it, you will start to think why the characters had to compete so hard, and that will lead you to think, why am I living a life in such a competitive manner? Why do we have to compete all the time? Where did this all start? And where is it leading us to? He said. I wasn't satisfied with that. I feel like there's a discrepancy between what is being criticized in the show and what Huang said here. I know I have to take into account the fact that I'm watching this as a Western woman and that South Korea is politically and socially very different. Competitiveness and success are huge there. It's part of their culture and part of the way we Westerners see them, or you if you happen to be South Korean. And so making a movie or show that criticizes those things through a class struggle perspective is quite bold. So yeah, maybe Huang didn't want to be tagged as a radical and he wanted to let people interpret the show the way they wanted to, which I did. And also, bear in mind that it's Netflix, so you can be woke, no problem, but don't be too radical, okay? I don't know, but as we discussed with my sister, who started watching K-dramas many years ago, at a time where you had to wait 2 weeks before getting English subtitles, Squid Game is part of a bigger trend in South Korea. And so yes, for me, Squid Game is not just about the competitiveness of our capitalist societies or the corruption of individuals by money. Squid Game is about meritocracy, equality versus equity, about violence, physical violence versus symbolic violence. It's about trust and empathy, or the absence of it. Now let's unpack all of this. First, meritocracy. Meritocracy is a political system in which economic goods and/or political power are vested in individual people on the basis of talent, effort, and achievement, rather than wealth and social class. In Squid Game, Cho Sung-hoo is the embodiment of meritocracy. His mother has pictures of him all around her little shop. She's extremely proud of him and the fact that he went to Seoul National University. She is respected in the neighborhood as the mother of a successful child. In the game, Sung-hoo is one of the few anomalies. He's one of the few who has already experienced what it's like to be wealthy, yet he lost it all and is now back at the bottom. Opposite to Sung-hoo is Song Gi-hong, the anti-hero. He's divorced, he has abandoned his daughter, he gambles, he lives with his mum, he loses at everything he undertakes. Most characters in the show fit into the anti-hero category. Doksu is a gangster, Abdul Ali is a foreign worker from Pakistan exploited by his boss, Han Min-yo is a single mother, only Kan Se-byok, a North Korean defector, commands both respect, like Sang-woo, and empathy, like the others. Meritocracy is related to another big concept, the survival of the fittest, invented by Charles Darwin to explain the evolution of species. This concept was then translated into social sciences, social Darwinism. The idea that certain people become powerful in society because they are innately better. Yet, the survival of the fittest, meritocracy, applied to our modern societies cannot work, because while we are presented as equal on paper, in the law, the way society is designed isn't fair. When you don't look like the people in power, when you don't have the same connections as the people in power, when you don't go to the same schools as people in power, when you're in debt, makes the race to success very unfair. That's something that's made clear in Squid Game, and the masters of the game are aware of it. In fact, Squid Game is presented as the great equalizer. All the players are equal, and most importantly, the game is fair. Any form of privilege is cancelled. When the doctor helped to extract organs in exchange of some help from the soldiers, the front man not only apologized to the players, but was also happy to show them the death sentence the doctor and the soldiers got. He wanted to show the players that he's on their side. During one of the last games, player uses his skill as a former glassmaker and manages to differentiate the breakable from the solid glass thanks to the reflection of the light. Immediately after noticing his strategy, the frontman shut down the lights, making the game as fair as possible. Now, it's hard to believe that the psychopaths behind Squid Game generously want to give those people a fair chance to finally win at life. As it will be revealed at the end of the show, the sole purpose of Squid Game is entertainment. Everything was thought so that the creator and his wealthy friends could have fun. Actually, in episode 5, titled A Fair World, when the doctor escapes the surgery room, the soldier reassures him, saying he won't kill him. He adds that it's a huge problem when a player's missing, but when it's a soldier, no one cares. They only care about equality and equity as long as it concerns the players, the entertainers. When it comes to the soldiers, who, honestly, don't seem to be better off than the players, no one cares. Even the players can sometimes act as virtue signalers. When Mignot gets rejected from her original gang-like team, she joins the other team with all our main characters. She naturally asks who's the leader here, to which Sang-woo replied that they were all equal, there was no leader. Again, yes, they are equal on paper, but the power dynamics are still present in their group. Sang-woo appears as the natural leader, he's the embodiment of the alpha male. Surprisingly, he only addresses the two other adult men, and women and the old man are just left on the side. Sang-woo does not really care about their opinion. These two examples show that Squid Game is also about how power dynamics are internalized, and as a consequence, how people think they are progressive and cool when they're not. Horror tropes as social commentary. As I said at the beginning of the video, horror tropes have become quite popular in K-dramas as they add another layer to the social commentary being made. The year when Parasite came out, Joker and Us were also released and dealt with similar themes, the working class struggle, the failure of meritocracy, through a horror lens. They all thought to highlight that the use of physical violence by the working class is a response to the symbolic violence of the wealthy and the state. That getting fired, being homeless, not having access to healthcare, being discriminated against, or just the mere display of wealth are forms of violence. Non-physical, that's for sure, but they still hurt. The concept of symbolic violence was theorized by Pierre Bourdieu in the 1970s. It refers to all the norms that are designed and legitimized by the oppressor and that are internalized by the oppressed, even though they harm them. In Squid Game, the players are all destitute, they lack money and are stuck at the bottom for multiple reasons. The norm would say that this is their fault if they are in this situation, that they need to work harder. But we could also say that the state and its lack of support put them into this situation. The working class cannot exercise that form of silent, symbolic violence towards the rich because their means of action are limited. The only thing they own is their body, and so the only thing they can do is just protest and use physical violence that is amplified as horror in K-dramas. That's the only power they have, inside or outside Squid Game. They cannot influence politicians, they cannot use money to settle things down. And that's probably the reason why they decided to all come back to the game. Because did they really have a choice, between a slow, shameful death in the real world or a quick, heroic, adrenaline-packed death in Squid Game? What would you choose? Having reached this degree of individualism, it's hard to imagine that any form of class consciousness could have appeared in the confines of the game. What I find interesting though is that the two least trusting characters both represent two very different, yet somehow similar cultures. I'm talking about Se-byuk and Sang-woo. Se-byuk is probably the least trusting character and has to relate to the country she comes from, North Korea, largely based on a culture of denunciation encouraged by the state. On the other hand, Sang-woo's form of success is certainly the result of his competitiveness and extreme individualism, also encouraged by the state. In the show, that is reflected in his desire to control everything and willingness to betray the ones closest to him. His internalization of meritocracy, an ideal sustained by modern capitalist societies, corrupted his sense of empathy, justice and trust, something Gi-hong, who failed times and times again at meritocracy, finds back in the game as a form of class solidarity. To conclude, I would say that I'm quite excited to see how the social commentary will evolve in season 2. I hope it'll get a bit more radical because I think there is potential for that. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, we can continue the discussion in the comments. I would like to thank my Patreons as well, and especially Carla, James and Joshua. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Salut!